Hey guys, Bike here, and I'm back again with another Last Epoch video. I'm about 100 hours deep into this game now, a little bit more than that. Been streaming it over on Twitch, twitch.tv/BabblingBike, and been having a great time. It's definitely been a blast. So I decided to come to you guys with a video with a few tips for beginning players. So like, let's say you just got the game, right? And you've learned just enough about the game that you know that you want to play it. So you've kind of stopped watching videos and you're getting ready to jump in. And I don't know, maybe you're having doubts and you're like, let me just look up a couple tips before I start playing. This video is for you. So these tips are in no particular order. So I'm just going to get into it. First, don't bother selling equipment. You're going to get showered with loot in this game. You're absolutely going to get showered with loot in this game. And if you play Diablo 4 like me, you pick up the loot, you go and sell it, and you make a little pretty penny. The thing is, you're not going to make much gold from that. Even if you're picking up like uniques just to go and sell, you're not going to make much gold there. And honestly, you're probably not going to be finding a ton of uniques in the beginning. There are a few that you find along the way. They're kind of like jammed in there, like they're almost an auto drop. But nonetheless, I wouldn't bother just picking up items to go and sell. This leads into my next tip, which is kind of familiarize yourself with the loot filter. It is a lot to take in for sure, but if you can familiarize yourself just enough with the loot filter, you can kind of maybe, just stick like a couple items in there that you're looking for. Like, I want this ring and I want it to have critical strike chance on it. Bam, you can plug that in there, and you can even set it to highlight and find these items for you, and it'll highlight the item. It's not gonna like find it and add it to your inventory immediately, but if it drops on the ground, it'll be highlighted like, hey, this is a ring with critical strike chance. Like, you can get really in depth and fine tune what you're looking for in this game, but I would just start with the basics. Now, if you're running a guide on this game, this video is probably already not for you anyway. Hashtag sorry for not saying that earlier. But if you're using a guide, they probably already have like a loot filter list that's just a bunch of words that make no sense to you, and you just copy it and paste it into your loot filter, and bam, there you go. But if you're going into it like I did, I'd even touch the loot filter until I got into the end game. And a few people in my chat were like, hey, dummy, you should probably be using the loot filter. Here's a couple ideas. So familiarize yourself with it and go from there. This leads into my next tip, which is use the in-game guide. Now, the default button, if you're playing mouse and keyboard, for the guide in the game is G. You press G, and there's going to be a huge just list of stuff that they tell you about the game. I would advise you to take this in stages because it's going to be overwhelming. It's going to be absolutely overwhelming if you just press G, start at the top, read, next line, read, next line, read. This guide is perfect if you're playing through the game and you run into something and you're like, what does this do? Well, press G. There's a little search bar at the top because there's going to be a huge long list of stuff right over here. You press G, type into the top, I found this ring that has critical strike chance. I don't know anything about ARPGs. What does critical strike chance do? Type in critical strike chance. Boom. It's going to pull up like a little section on critical strike chance, and it's going to tell you all about critical strike chance, and it'll probably even have like a few like little options to kind of lead off to what other effects you can get with critical strike chance. But you can definitely use this to your advantage. Again, I would only use this in stages, like maybe even when you first boot into the game, open it up and read a line or two just to be like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. It's going to be very overwhelming if you read it all at once. If you're like me. If you're not like me and you're somebody who could just sit there and read the whole thing, yeah, knock yourself out. Go for it. This leads into my next tip. Now, this tip is gonna come a little bit later on into the game. You're still gonna be in the campaign, but I started really noticing that I was getting one shot. And my players were like, not my players, my chat was like, hey man, what's your resistances at? I'm like, huh? So we pulled it up, and my resistances actually weren't that bad. It was just, I was finding equipment. I'm like, that looks cool, and I was slotting it in. And they're like, we would recommend that you get to 75% because that's the cap. The cap on all your resistances is 75%. For each node, there's like 7 resistances. I would recommend that you get close to that cap because even in the campaign, the campaign kind of serves as a giant tutorial, right? And I would try and find some equipment with, some of this, some of that, maybe you find an idol or something because as you're playing the campaign, you're going to be doing these side quests and you're going to unlock these idol slots. Look at what the idol does. And if it has a resistance that maybe you're lacking in, slot it in there. If you find a piece of gear with a resistance on there, go ahead, slot that in there if it's something that you need. And try and get close to that 75 cap. It's going to really help you a lot. This also leads to my next one. Familiarize yourself with the crafting system. The crafting system, kind of like the in-game guide, can also be a little overwhelming because you got these prefixes and you got these suffixes, and they're universally known as affixes. Prefixes go on this side of the weapon, suffixes go on that side of the weapon, or armor, rings, helmet, whatever. It can get really in depth, and you're going to need to know a lot more when you're getting into the end game, but understanding just the basics that especially if what I just said, you're looking for resistances on your gear, maybe use the loot system to, if you're finding gear with like no resistances whatsoever, but you got open slots on there, slap some resistances on there. You're going to find these little shards throughout the game. You're going to click on them, and you're going to transfer those shards to your little crafting inventory. As far as I can tell, you can't trade them anyway, so you might as well just immediately you find a bunch of them, transfer them over to your little crafting inventory. As far as I'm aware of, it's infinite, so just keep stacking up these shards. Just get thousands of these things. And you can just start slotting in resistances as you're going along for whatever you're lacking, just to get through the campaign and into the end game. And this leads to my next topic. Read the tags on your abilities. Maybe I should have said this one earlier, but nonetheless, this is in no particular order. Reading the tags on your abilities can be really useful because sometimes you'll find a unique or there will be an ability in your skill tree that gives, it gives you like +3 dexterity, or it gives like dexterity. And if you're reading the tags on your abilities, you can be like, oh, well, this tag right here says that it scales with dexterity. I get extra damage or whatever if I have more dexterity. And it's really useful. It's a lot of information because like maybe you find this weapon with like +25 physical damage. You're like, wow, this sounds really good. I've been attacking with this ability over here. It's really nice. And then you read the tag and you realize this the ability you've been using scales with fire damage, not physical. Well, then maybe that sword is not the best fit for your current build. Now you can save it, put it somewhere else, and maybe somewhere down the line it can become useful, or you can trash it. But it would be really useful not to be equipping all these items and then it's like my damage isn't going up. This should be going really well. Well, read the scaling tags on the abilities, and you'll be able to go from there. And this leads to my final tip. At a point in the game, you're going to be able to choose a mastery class. this is kind of like one of the main draws to Last Epoch. You have these 5 base classes, you know, just like Diablo 4. You got 5 classes. Well, each class has 3 masteries that they can choose from. Now, not all the masteries are out yet, but they're getting pretty close. So, like, let's say you're playing Rogue. They have 3 masteries. One of them's not out yet, so effectively you have 2 masteries. But let's say you're like, yeah, I want to be a Blade Singer. You pick Blade Singer, you're good to go. Now you're a Blade Singer. And logic would dictate you put points in your base class, and now you can put points in your mastery class. What I didn't realize, and maybe this is very obvious to everyone else, but to me at least, I didn't realize you can put points in another mastery up to a point. There's like a little line right there that tells you, no, you can't do this. So what I'm saying is, take a look at that. You know, anything past that line on that little mastery, you can automatically ignore, but maybe there's something useful there that you can dip into if you're not like following a guide and you're just kind of trying to put together your own build. You can look and be like, oh, wow, I could pick up some resistances here. I don't have to slap it on my gear. I can take it right here. Use this for right now, then maybe later on down the line, you can respec and take those points out, but you can use those temporarily or even fully as part of your final in-game build to dip into that. So anyway, I'm Babbling Bike. I hope you guys found these tips useful, and I hope that you can apply them to your next game session of Last Epoch. Anyway, you guys take care. You have a good one. Cheers.